Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean, and it's good to be on with you. Happy New Year to you. 2025. Is it going to be the year of terrorism? People are asking the question since we have started this year off with just, it seems like bad news. Bad news indeed. And today we're going to be analyzing the story of these two attacks for sure. Shamsud Den-Jabbar, 42-year-old in New Orleans, Houston guy, my own backyard, literally just down the street. And then, of course, there's the Las Vegas guy, which we're now discovering that authorities have released his name, Matt Livelsberger, 37-year-old, found in the truck, the Tesla truck that exploded in front of the Trump Tower in Las Vegas. Here's the thing. Both men served in the Army. Both men at one point in their career were stationed at the same base at the same time. Coincidence? Could be. But what are the chances? I'm wondering. What are the chances that both men in the Army at the same base at the same time also would be involved in incidents on the same day that it included like crazy stuff? I don't know. Maybe it's time to play the lottery. But everybody's turning to Sarah Adams now from months ago when she tried to warn us of incidents just like this. Have a listen.
This now is going to sound like a conspiracy theory. Hamza bin Laden went to Sanaullah Ghaffari, who's the head of ISIS Khorasan province, and said, hey, we don't want to just claim our attacks in the US and Europe on ISKP. We need ISKP bodies, right? We need terrorists at that attack. So when they're dead and you ID them back, you say, yes, they're ISIS Khorasan province. So Hamza bin Laden and Sanaullah Ghaffari made a deal, and there would be ISIS fighters in Al-Qaeda's homeland attack. It's really interesting. And
interesting because they found the ISIS flag in the truck of the New Orleans driver. We're going to be talking about these connections with our good friend Brent Haynes at 14 past the hour. And then Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition is going to be on the team at 30 past the hour. We're going to get his take on all this and his 2025 predictions as we analyze the terrorist attacks already starting off this year. And then, of course, breaking news in Brooklyn, New York, Queens, New York, rather, there was a shooting. 11 people were injured at a nightclub out of Queens. The violence has started very early. Let's pray, fast, and do penance that we might be able to turn this world around. We have a lot to pray for. We're going to be putting links to everything we talk about in the show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Do us a favor and share us with a friend today. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and now your saint of the day.
Saint Macarius the Younger, pray for us. Macarius was born in the early 4th century to a poor family in Alexandria. He is called the Younger to distinguish him from an older contemporary Egyptian hermit saint of the same name. The younger Macarius worked as a seller of fruit and confections before rejecting the world and retiring into the desert as a hermit. He sometimes gave counsel, but usually preferred a more solitary way of life, gathering with his fellow hermits only on Saturdays and Sundays for the Holy Liturgy and Sacraments. Even among these great ascetics, Macarius stood out for his severe mortifications. He briefly spent some time in a monastery under St. Pachomius, disguised, until the monks discovered his identity and thanked him for the example he had set. Once he resisted a temptation to go work in the hospitals in Rome, discerning that this was a temptation to be seen and recognized for his piety and works. In the year of our Lord 375, Macarius the Elder and the Younger were together exiled by the Arians. The younger Macarius died some 20 years later after his eventual return. He is considered a patron of pastry chefs due to his original occupation. For more about this day and others in the Church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints and seasons. Saint Macarius the Younger, pray for us.
And now your headline news. Ground News is reporting a fireworks explosion in the Honolulu area has killed 3 people and injured at least 20. Emergency services responded to the incident shortly after the explosion. Witnesses reported loud noises followed by chaos in the vicinity. Authorities are currently investigating the circumstances surrounding the explosion. The Associated Press is reporting toxic fumes sicken 20 workers at a New Mexico cheese plant. A hazardous chemical incident at a cheese plant in eastern New Mexico caused 20 workers to be sickened and sent to the hospital, with 2 in critical condition. The incident occurred when just over half a gallon of acid spilled and then somehow mixed with a half a gallon or more of chlorine, leading to a dangerous chemical reaction, according to the sheriff's office. The company has been operating since 2005, closed off the area quickly, but the leak is still under investigation. Breitbart reports hundreds march for Intifada in New York City just hours after the attacks in New Orleans and Las Vegas. Hundreds of pro-Palestinian protesters marched in New York City on New Year's Day for Intifada, blocking 6th Avenue in Manhattan just hours after a terror attack in New Orleans, Louisiana, and an explosion in Las Vegas, Nevada. Quote, "There is only one solution, Intifada revolution," close quote, they chanted. Intifada, Arabic for uprising, is associated with the Second Intifada, a period of terror attacks in Israel in the early 2000s, marked by suicide bombings. And those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from John chapter 1, verses 19 through 28. And this is the testimony of John, when the Jews sent from Jerusalem priests and Levites to him, to ask him, "Who art thou?" And he confessed, and he did not deny. And he confessed, "I am not the Christ." And they asked him, "What then? Art thou Elias?" And he said, "I am not." "Art thou the prophet?" And he answered, "No." They said therefore unto him, "Who art thou, that we may give an answer to them that sent us? What sayest thou of thyself?" And he said, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, Make straight the way of the Lord, as said the prophet Isaiah." And they that were sent were of the Pharisees. And they asked him, and said to him, "Why then dost thou baptize, if thou be not Christ, nor Elias, nor the prophet?" And John answered them, saying, "I baptize with water, but there has stood one in the midst of you whom you know not. The same is he that shall come after me, who is preferred before me, the latchet of whose shoe I am not worthy to loose." These things were done in Bethany, beyond the Jordan, where John was baptizing. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. So much could be said there. Did you catch the language about the prophecy of Moses, about the one that would come, who was from among you? One greater than Moses would come. Moses warned the people. He told them that there would be a Messiah that would come from among the people that would be greater than him. John is saying this. Those priests, those Levites, they would have understood that perfectly. Whereas you and I, we get totally lost. We don't see these details. We miss them. We look at the scripture from a very surface level. But John is telling us this is the fulfilled prophecy of Moses. It is a big deal. It is truly a big deal. Cornelius a Lapide said the reason of this embassy was because the chief priest saw John leading in the desert an angelic life, preaching with great power, baptizing, and moving men to repentance, as none of the other prophets had done. The chief priest thought, therefore, that it was their duty to ask him who he was, especially because they knew that the scepter had passed from Judah to Herod, and the 70 weeks of Daniel the prophet being completed, the coming of Messiah must nigh be at hand. Wherefore, suspecting that John was the Messiah, they asked him, "Who art thou?" Cornelius a Lapide, the great Catholic scripture scholar of the 17th century, is telling us that the Jews, the Pharisees, the Levites that they sent, they knew that the time for the Messiah had come because of Daniel the prophet. This was the fullness of time, and they knew it. And they were given everything that they needed to believe, and still they rejected. Let that sink in. It goes on. But although there might be some envy mingled with it, the true reason was, as I have said, that it was the counsel of God so to exalt John that the chief priests might be driven to ask him whether he was the Christ or not. That being asked, he might authoritatively answer that which was the truth, namely, that not he, but Jesus was the Messiah. And that being convicted by this testimony of John, they might be compelled either to receive Jesus as the Messiah or to be without excuse. To be without excuse. We will be judged. There will be no excuses that get us out of it. Let that sink in. There's going to come a time when the time of mercy that we are enjoying right now comes to an end, and the time of judgment will be upon us. It'll be at our death, whenever that might be. Are we ready for that? Because there will be no excuses. You will not stand before the judgment seat of Christ and says, but. It's not going to happen. You have been given everything you need. Proclaim the goodness of God's truth in your life. Accept it. Repent and believe in the gospel. Accept his mercy for your life while you still can, because there will be no excuses when that time comes. Coming up after the break, I want to talk to Brent Haynes about the terrorist attack in New Orleans with the ISIS flag there, his connection to Houston and the others that they're looking for who planted bombs. Was it an attack against Catholics attending Mass on New Year's Day? Therein lies the question. And the connection to Las Vegas. All of that is coming up next. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
Did you know you can help evangelize simply by using your cell phone? The Station of the Cross is partnering with iCatholic Mobile, America's only Catholic mobile phone company. When you join iCatholic Mobile, a portion of every dollar will support our programming. Plus, you'll enjoy great service with iCatholic Unlimited 5G data, text, and talk. With iCatholic Mobile, you can stay connected with family and friends while also spreading the truth of Jesus Christ with clarity and charity. Join today at iCatholicMobile.com.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Hey, coming up at 30 past the hour, we've invited Dr. Anthony Stine to be on the program. We're going to get his take on the New Year's Day's terror attacks and then his predictions for 2025, starting this year off in the way we have. I wonder what's coming next. I think everybody's sort of feeling there's a shoe about to drop on planet Earth. We're going to get Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition to talk about that. But there are lots of stories in the news, and we're talking about these attacks on New Year's Day. The one in New Orleans, Shamsud Din-Jabbar, 42-year-old from Houston, Texas, actually just down the street from where I'm at right now, which is kind of crazy to think about. But he apparently didn't act alone. Have a listen to this.
We're just hearing now from the Associated Press that investigators have reviewed video of 3 men and a woman placing possible explosives around this area. Tracy,
which is very interesting to say the least, since Raymond Arroyo from EWTN's World Over Live actually tweeted out that they found these IEDs in front of the cathedral in the French Quarter. Was this a potential attack against Catholics about to attend Mass on a holy day of obligation, New Year's Day? Very interesting. We've invited our good friend of the program, Catholic and a freedom fighter, Brent Haynes, to be on the show to talk about this. Brent, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Joe. Good morning. I wish it were a better morning.
Yeah, to be sure. Shamsud Din-Jabbar, they've already raided, according to KPRC Channel 2 in Houston, they've already raided his house in Houston, Texas. Some people were detained. There's some dramatic footage of a man sort of stripping down naked and walking backwards as a part of that raid. Very interesting. What do you make of this?
Well, that shows how quickly the FBI can act when they have the motivation and the willpower to do it.
Isn't that interesting?
There are already reports of the FBI, executing search warrants. The FBI themselves says they're preparing and executing search warrants in various places. No doubt this is going to take advantage of the full resources of the FBI. This is an appropriate case for the FBI. Local law enforcement is not equipped to handle a case like this. This is why the FBI exists, to address, to investigate, address, and ideally prevent threats either of a direct criminal nature or of a terroristic nature. The FBI has the resources to do this. They can cross jurisdictional boundaries. They have a lot more money than law enforcement. They have expertise in areas like computer forensics, laboratories, analytical software. They have access to national databases. They have relationships with the other aspects of the national intelligence community. So it's appropriate for the feds to be doing this. And this shows how much they can get done when they're focusing on what should be their core mission.
What's also very interesting about this story is not just the IEDs that they discovered in various locations around the French Quarter, as well as in the truck itself, the ISIS flag they discovered in the truck, and, of course, his AR-15, his sidearm, all of that. He obviously died in a gun battle with police. But now, in the Las Vegas case, there is reports out that they've named the person they found inside the truck, Matt Livelsberger. And here's the interesting connection here, is both Matt Livelsberger and Shamsuddin Jabbar both served in the Army. But at one point in their careers, they were both stationed at the same base at the same time. Could be pure coincidence. We don't know what any connections there are between these two. However, it is very interesting to say, well, what are the probabilities, do you think, that these two individuals, both served at the same base at the same time, would also be involved in incidents on the very same day that includes craziness and chaos? I mean, the probability seems like very remote that might be the case. What do you make of that as somebody with prosecutorial experience?
Well, this is an example where the FBI will go back and they will look at all of the military records. No doubt the military investigative services, and each branch of the military has their own criminal investigative service. There have been TV shows about them. They will go back. They will look at the military service records of these people. They will cross-reference them in time. They will talk to their commanding officers at the time. And they will go back and they will interview the people who were serving with them to find out, with direct testimony, if it appeared that these two men knew each other or spent time with each other, did things with each other. Your time in the military is pretty well documented. Now, when you're off duty, that's not necessarily true, but there are still witnesses to be interviewed. And that's what the FBI will be doing there, and the military investigative services. And this is what they should be doing. This is part of this is supposed to be the core mission of the FBI. Let's remember it's going to be overlooked by a lot of people, certainly probably by the mainstream media. But at 6 a.m., just hours after the attack in New Orleans, the special agent in charge or assistant special agent in charge held a press conference and said it was not a terroristic act. She actually said that. She's on video saying that.
Yeah.
And that just shows you that woke mentality still pervades the FBI because the same people are still in charge. Christopher Wray is still in charge. He's going to resign. His resignation hasn't taken effect yet. But first of all, Joe, only hours after an attack like this, the FBI had no way of being able to affirmatively say that this was not a terroristic attack. Let's leave aside the evidence that they did have at that point. How about the clue of an ISIS flag being on the back of the pickup? How about the fact that the man was wearing body armor and came out of his truck with a rifle and shot two police officers? Aside from that evidence, that was unprofessional, and there was no basis for that at all. And the only reasonable explanation is that it's the woke ideology of coming out and defending certain groups in the United States, while the FBI, on the other hand, is very quick to condemn other groups in the United States, such as pro-lifers and Catholics and parents who go to high school or local public school board meetings. And that's why the FBI should be focused on their real mission. And this isn't just a layman's talk coming from me or from you. Former FBI agents have said this. One former FBI agent said last night the FBI has taken its eyes off the ball. Another former FBI agent, Nicole Parker, mentioned that she had seen information on a diversity agent recruitment event in New Orleans last summer, or perhaps this coming summer, a diversity agent recruitment event in New Orleans. Wow. And her point in mentioning this is the FBI needs to focus on stopping crime and stopping terrorism, not on distractions such as diversity. And she's exactly right. Joe, do you remember the incompetence of the Secret Service with not one but two potential Trump assassinations?
Yes, I do.
Why do we think that the policies and the culture, the attitude of the people in the FBI would be any different than it is at the Secret Service? I mean, it's not as if they operate under different presidential administrations.
Right. Yeah. Here's the other aspect to this. I want to throw another log onto the fire here. Sarah Adams, months ago now on the Sean Ryan podcast, actually warned us about potential attacks just like this. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes today. But she actually said that ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban would all, work together to make sure that there were homeland terror attacks in the United States, but ISIS specifically would take the fall for them, which I find very interesting. And everybody's going back and now rewatching that, which I think brings up a bigger question here, Brent. And that is, I think most Americans today are there's a bit of schizophrenia in our mind right now. We want to be protected from terror attacks like this, but at the same time, we don't trust, based on some of the things you just said, we don't trust those that are tasked with protecting us. We don't trust what they're going to say to us. We don't trust that they've got our best interests at heart. We don't trust that they're going to tell us the truth all the time, and they're going to withhold all kinds of information. We don't know what to believe at this point. It feels very schizophrenic, and ultimately we think, like the Patriot Act, they're just going to erode more of our civil liberties. What say you?
Well, Americans have good reason for that. Joe, why was the FBI investigating and trying to infiltrate traditional Latin mass Catholic communities? Why? Why were they doing that? Why did they go after Mark Houck, a man who goes out and peacefully prays across from an abortion center? Why did the FBI go after him when one of the most liberal prosecutors, state and local prosecutors in the country, in Philadelphia, one of the most liberal prosecutors in the country, did not go after Mark Houck? The most reasonable explanation is because of their political philosophy. And so they go out and they raid his house unnecessarily. And look, I've been on plenty of search warrant executions. I'm all in favor of the utmost for officer security. But raiding somebody's house in the pre-dawn hours with a SWAT team is not always the safest way of doing that. And yet that's what they did to Mark Houck. And the case was so weak that within a year, a local Philadelphia jury threw it out of court and exonerated Mark Houck or acquitted him. Why did the FBI come out against parents going to school board meetings in collaboration with a letter sent by the educational group and the White House to the Department of Justice, complaining about parents who go to school board meetings and dare to voice their opinions about the policies in their local schools? When the FBI is doing that, they're not investigating terrorists. When the FBI is doing that, they're not looking for people like the man who drove a truck into a crowd on Bourbon Street. And we saw it again at 6 o'clock in the morning immediately after the attack, when they very quickly came out and said this was not a terrorist act. So Americans have good reason to be suspicious. And that's why Senator Kennedy from Louisiana came out and said the FBI needs to be forthcoming, needs to tell the American people the truth. And why do we think the FBI doesn't tell us the truth? Look at the very elaborate activity they undertook, the very elaborate actions on the Hunter Biden laptop. They didn't just once or twice deny that the Hunter Biden laptop was not genuine. They actually spent months cultivating contacts in the media to prepare them, essentially grooming them, a law enforcement term, grooming them to receive the information by telling them that they expected an October surprise. Then when the Hunter Biden laptop story broke, then the media thinks, aha, here's the October surprise that the FBI warned us about. And then the FBI doesn't admit that the laptop is authentic, even though they have since had an FBI agent in court testifying that it was authentic. So this is what happens when politics, and especially the far-left version of radical politics, invades the administration of government, and it hits its worst aspect when it enters the law enforcement arena. And you saw
but Brent, the government has
a press conference.
The government has a tendency, when things like this happen, to implement the Patriot Act, for instance. Are we going to have to go through TSA to rent on Turo from now on? Because both the Las Vegas incident and the New Orleans incident both rented their EVs through Turo, which is an interesting link to say the least. Were they hoping that both of these vehicles would also catch fire and explode in the crazy ways we see these batteries do on social media? It just, the whole thing is bizarre. And ultimately, I mean, are we going to see the upping of Patriot Act in 2025? Will our civil liberties be further eroded because of these terrorist attacks?
Well, there are always those who want to increase the power of law enforcement, even those who have good motivations. And then, of course, people with bad motivations can take advantage of those powers. But Americans are probably going to see, if attacks like this continue, we're going to continue to see changes in American life. Just like we have to go through extensive security procedures at airports, we're probably going to see more traffic and vehicle bollards put up at places where people gather, such as, and more metal detectors that will go up to places where people gather, for places such as sporting venues. The schools already have metal detectors. Most or all schools do. Certainly most do in large cities.
Well, let's pray. Let's pray, Brent, that doesn't happen. We'll see you next week. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Coming up after the break, more breaking news and stories. Dr. Anthony Stine is going to weigh in and give us his 2025 predictions. We'll see you there. Don't go. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and here are your headline news. The Daily Wire reports assailant charged after allegedly shoving a man directly in the path of an oncoming subway train. In another horrifying attack in the New York City subway system, a 23-year-old man has been charged with attempted murder after allegedly shoving a commuter onto the tracks just as a train arrived at the 18th Street subway station in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan. Kamal Hawkins was taken into custody Tuesday after allegedly pushing a 45-year-old man roughly at 1:30 p.m. on the southbound number 1 train platform. The victim was taken to Bellevue Hospital with injuries to his head and a broken rib, but was conscious and alert. He is expected to survive. Praise be to God. Catholic Vote reports Francis defends sanctity of life in first homily of 2025. Pope Francis defended the dignity of human life in his first homily of the new year, calling on Catholics to entrust the year to Mary, the Mother of God. Francis called for, quote, a firm commitment to respect for the dignity of human life from conception to natural death, so that each person may cherish his or own life, may look to hope with a future. Close quote. Ground News reports Biden is giving the second highest civilian award to the leaders of the January 6th congressional panel. That's rich, isn't it? President Joe Biden is awarding the second highest civilian medal to Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson for their leadership in the January 6th congressional investigation. The ceremony will take place at the White House, where Biden will honor 20 individuals for their service. The Presidential Citizens Medal is the second highest civilian honor after the Medal of Freedom. Biden stated that these Americans are bonded by their common decency and commitment to serving others. Some would say at their own personal interest, but those are your headline news. Joining us right now is Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition. We're going to put a link to his YouTube channel and his website in our show notes today. But Return to Tradition on YouTube, it's a go-to resource for me, and I'm sure it is for many of you as well. But Dr. Stine, good morning to you. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Thanks for being on the team.
Good morning. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas to you and your crew. I usually don't come in laughing, but Joe Biden is quite the comedian. Now, the question is, will this ceremony come with a preemptive pardon stapled to the award?
Exactly. Yes. I wondered
there's been talk of that.
Yeah.
I was wondering. When we were talking about this last week, me coming on, we didn't have a topic yet. But if you had pitched a topic for predictions for 2025, it would be very different now than it was after the events of the last 24, 36 hours. Because you are aware that I don't know if I came in part of the way through your previous guests. Did he talk about the shooting at the Manhattan nightclub last night?
I mentioned the shooting last night, or that happened last night at the very top of the hour when I opened the show about I think it was 10 people injured right now. It's
I saw
crazy.
11. I thought it was 11. Yeah. So there was that. And did you cover the bomb found outside the New Orleans Cathedral?
Yes. Raymond Arroyo reported that early on yesterday. And so I asked the question, I'd love to get your take on that. Do you think that was intended for mass goers on New Year's Day?
Yes, absolutely. It's something like that was planned knowing there would be a large number of Catholics there. Yeah. Which means that somebody there has a better than average understanding of when Catholics would go to Mass, because it's in the United States and Canada that we had a Holy Day of Obligation yesterday, which makes me wonder what really is going on with this. And there's a lot of chatter being right now about how the government had told us last year that there were 1,000 Al-Qaeda members or something in the United States, around the country, something like that. And it could be that that's an exaggerated number because the information comes from Al-Qaeda itself. But it could be an interesting year. And this is why this morning I opened up my own live stream with telling people with a very YouTube safe version of these stories to tell people to be advised, to pay attention, be safe. And even if you normally don't like your bishop much, if he gives you advice or instruction on safety related issues about this, maybe take it to heart, because we are entering into possibly going to be a very interesting year. Remember, the inauguration is only 17 days away, 18 days away.
It feels like forever away at this point.
It does. But there's a good thing that's coming from all of this, one good thing, and that is there had been talk about slowing down all the nominees for these various cabinet positions, and now you're getting a lot of people, the general public as well as people with political connections, saying, get those security-related appointees in as fast as possible. Your new director of the FBI, your new director of national intelligence, the attorney general, Homeland Security. You need to get all those guys in as quickly as possible, because people might literally be dying because of political games. And so there's that much, at least. I'm trying to find a silver lining to all the stories.
Do you think Kash Patel will get the nod? Do you think he can get through congressional scrutiny and actually take over the reins at the FBI? And how quickly do you think he can have an impact on that department?
Well, from what I had seen, Kash Patel actually was basically endorsed by some of the Republicans who were wanting to hold up some of the other nominees. Because you usually see the same 4 or 5 names who are trying to hold up nominees, but they like Kash Patel, and that's a good thing, I guess. I have no reason to distrust Kash Patel, and can he do this? I hope so. I really do, because what happened in New Orleans in terms of the FBI response? Remember, they were pictures of the FBI agents taking pictures of the ISIS flag that was on the guy's truck. And what happened? The FBI came out and told us, this isn't terrorism.
Right.
Give me a break. You're lying to people's faces. A lot of people are pointing this out, but if you're not very online like I am and like maybe Joe is, right? You might not be aware that there are now normal people pointing out that the FBI spent the better part of the last few years spying on parishes, spying on grandmas who are pro-life, arresting grandmas who are pro-life, enforcing the FACE Act, and engaging in political warfare. Instead of doing things like responding and putting resources into credible threats from organizations against the people of the United States.
Right.
And so if you can just reorient the FBI to that, going back to what its job has evolved into since its founding, which is these days part of Homeland Security, essentially against foreign threats domestically, as well as domestic threats. If you can just get back to that, legitimate threats, and I think Kash Patel can do that, and it would help restore people's faith in that organization, because the FBI is now one of the least trusted institutions in the United States, and for good reason. After all, what do you think happened? What do you think those guys found out sitting in a traditional Latin Mass every Sunday for 6 months as they spied on a parish? Probably not much, other than maybe a few of them had the seeds of conversion later in life planted by being there. We can hope and pray. But beyond that, what do they find out? That the priest at traditional Latin Mass parishes typically gives what we would call safe, in terms they don't talk much about things going on in the outside world, but still hard teachings from the Gospels. Okay, congratulations.
Yeah, I don't think you have to be Sarah Adams, for instance, former CIA intelligence analyst from Benghazi, who was part of the Benghazi attack. We all watched the movie 13 Hours, right? She was on Sean Ryan's podcast several months ago. She's been saying these things now for the last several years. And she basically said, what's coming is homeland attacks in America. between Al-Qaeda and ISIS. They want ISIS to take credit for it. So you're going to see ISIS bodies on the ground, ISIS flags, ISIS. Taliban leaking that information to American intelligence agencies so that when the reports come out, intelligence will say, yeah, we knew something about that. All of it is what she said months ago now. Everybody's going back and watching that interview, which is interesting to me. But I don't think you don't got to be Sherlock Holmes. You don't got to be Sarah Adams. You don't have to be former intelligence to put some dots together to go, golly gee whiz, when we have uncontrolled, unchecked, illegal migration going on at the highest levels in the history of our country, you're going to get bad actors who are going to do nefarious things in our country, and people are going to get hurt and they're going to die as a result. But this is common sense that it seems like our elected officials completely miss altogether. I'm not convinced. I'm a Debbie Downer here. I'm not convinced that will change in 2025, even under the Trump administration. Do you think there'll be a major shift, a major change towards the positive here?
I can't imagine if any of this stuff starts happening, even to a fraction of what that analyst you cited said. So I watched part of that video this morning, but I can't imagine if even a fraction of that happens, you don't see things like a demand from the public that the border wall get finished, because again, that's how they got in. They just walked across the border, or some of them were flown in by the government. I can't imagine this happening without a demand for action happening. Now, whether certain political actors who have the ability to gum up the works actually try to stop things from happening just for their own cynical power, we shall see. There is a noticeable difference in America now than it was, say, 20 years ago, 25 years ago after 9/11, right? After 9/11, there was unity for a time, and then Bush helped destroy that with his war in Iraq. People put aside their differences for security reasons, for common safety, the common good, I guess. And yes, that was exploited cynically by everybody involved. But now, what could you possibly get widespread bipartisan support on that wasn't a giant grift for lining everybody's pockets? Right. Nothing. I can't imagine anything. Right? That 1,500-page bill was the only thing you were going to get broad bipartisan support on, except what killed that bill was public outrage. We might find ourselves in a time where the political actors don't want to get involved. They don't want to work together until public outrage reaches a crescendo. So we'll see what happens. But that having been said, while I do think government should and people should take all these things seriously, this morning and last night, my wife and I were planning a summer road trip and our Christmas, visiting family at Christmas in 2025. So am I taking it seriously? Yes, but I'm not taking it in such a way where I'm going to just go turn my home into a bunker and never leave the house.
Sure.
Please do not do that. Let life go on. Respond accordingly as events happen, but don't live in fear. We are not supposed to live in fear. If anything, just like anything else in life, this should inspire you to go to confession more often.
Amen. Well,
if you don't pray the rosary every day, maybe start, pick up a new devotion, whatever it is you need to do to get yourself in the place spiritually that if you found yourself at a grocery store and you heard a loud noise, found yourself standing in front of our Lord immediately, you were ready for that instead of living in fear. Do not live in fear. That's the entire point of terrorism. It's in the name terrorism. It's to inspire fear in a population to force political change in a direction that they want. Don't give it to them. Yeah. Even if our own government is responsible for stirring up the mess in the Middle East, causing these people to do these things. Doesn't matter. We're taking care of that problem right now. It's going to take decades to take care of, but we've started that process in America, taking care of the corruption in the government, hopefully. But don't give them what they want. It's the old cowboy answer to America, to terrorism. The old cowboy American answer. Don't give in to their demands.
One thing I thought about when the New Orleans story was breaking yesterday and I was reading the news was I'd been to New Orleans. I'd been to the French Quarter. But unfortunately, when I was there, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was, doing very bad things. I was committing mortal sins and wanting to revel in the spirit of what is now the French Quarter. And I thought about that, and I thought about my time there and what little I remember of it, actually. And I thought, how horrible. It's even more horrible if you were to be run over by a car, killed by a terrorist. You probably are going to die in mortal sin. I mean, the opportunity to repent, the opportunity to beg God for mercy, your opportunity doesn't exist when you're being run over by a truck that's going 60, 70 miles an hour down a little corridor and you didn't see it coming. Like, think about that for a second. You just never know, just to sort of emphasize your point, you just never know when your day, your hour has arrived. So if you're not living in a state of grace, then you're really and truly not prepared. And then everything can be terror to you. But if you're living in a state of grace, nothing is terror, because you might go to heaven. I mean, the emphasis, the contrast seems rather stark to me in that regard. Hold that thought. That music means we're going to break. Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition is our guest. We're going to put a link to his YouTube channel in the show notes today. Return to Tradition. ReturnToTradition.org is his website as well. But coming up after the break, I want to get some predictions as far as the church goes in 2025. Where do you think we're headed in the church? Is the synod truly over? I mean, it seems to be the gift that keeps on giving. And of course, with the conversation that we had with Michael Hitchborn about Cardinal Fernandez having, universalist ideas, heretical universalist ideas, 2025 could prove to be a very interesting year for Holy Mother Church as well. We'll get Dr. Stine to weigh in on that. And then, of course, your commentary in the com boxes of the live video feeds and the after show, all still to come. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you on the first show of 2025. At least it's not boring times that we live in. Very interesting times, to say the least. We're having a conversation with Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition, ReturnToTradition.org, and on YouTube. That's a go-to source for me and for many in my audience, and I'm very grateful for his time today. Good morning again, Dr. Stine. Thanks for being on with us. So before, in the last segment, we were talking about the New Orleans terrorist attack. I believe there's a connection with the Las Vegas attack as well. We're going to find out what that connection is in the coming days. But let's talk about the church. What are your predictions for 2025 when it comes to the Catholic Church?
I believe, first and foremost, that Francis will still be here this time next year, that you and I may be having a very similar conversation this time next year and talking about the unbelievable things that Fernandez and Pope Francis and all the rest in Rome did over the course of 2025. And I start there because a lot of people get really kind of ghoulish almost, predicting his imminent demise and everything else. And I say ghoulish because it is kind of ghoulish to start predicting the death of the man that I assume most people listening to this do accept and acknowledge as the sovereign pontiff of the Catholic Church, which means you only want the best for him. And that would probably mean that he will be here this time next year, as he only works out his own spiritual side of things outside of the public eye. Now, that having been said, is the synod over? Well, no, because we are now going to have working groups that are going to be overseen by this synodal congress thing. It's synodality for all, synod without end, amen. That is where we are. You can also probably expect at some point this year, because there's already kind of stirrings about it, the next Synod of Bishops will be announced, probably for 2027, 2028, somewhere around there, because they happen about every 2 years. And so you'll probably get the Synod on the Clergy or the Synod on Women or something like that. You could usually tell what the next one's going to be by what things were discussed at the previous one. So probably Synod on Women will probably happen. Whereas Synod on homosexuality will probably happen. I mean, can you imagine that one? Can you imagine here's a reason why that could be announced this year. I'm not saying it will, but if I'm right, I will find it tragically funny, because they announced that for this coming September, a Jubilee pilgrimage for homosexuals. And these are not, because I would not use that term to describe Catholics living as Catholics should, who carry the cross of same-sex attraction, but who live as Catholics should. That is a caveat, because those people are courageous Catholics who are suffering souls, who are the example for every single one of us for whatever we deal with. They deal with something that none of us can even imagine, and more power to them. Courage International and similar organizations. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about New Ways Ministry, James Martin's outreach, James Martin himself, and other groups like that, they are having a pilgrimage in September for the Jubilee Year of Mercy. So don't be surprised if it's a synod on, I don't know how they'll characterize it. They'll probably come up with some Orwellian name for it, but that might be announced this year. I would expect this year you will get the synod announced.
One of the things I talked about on, I guess it was Tuesday with the Catholic Unscripted crew, was just the bizarre nature that we find ourselves in the church today. We have to have logos and we have to have, mascots, and it's like they've hired this insane non-Catholic atheist marketing firm to help us get with the times. That cross in Glasgow being an example of that. I had Hitchborn on. We talked about the Rosicarian nature, the Freemason nature of the symbology behind that cross. It's like, are you just that tone deaf, or do you really intend this? It's hard to know which these days. If I'm being charitable, I'll say you're tone deaf, but if I'm being honest, I think you mean it. And that just leaves us with nothing but distrust for the hierarchy of the church, which I think is very a part of the scandal and the tragedy of it all.
Yes, and it's also earning just mockery from people. I've saw non-Catholics who pay attention to the Catholic Church mocking this stuff. They were doing that with that and with the Luce, whatever, however you say the anime mascot thing.
Right.
All this stuff. The vestments at at some of the recent events that look like they were just right out of some graphic design course from like 2005. I mean, not only is it bad, it's dated bad.
The Notre Dame vestments. Yeah, they were horrible.
Yeah. There's a distinct lack of seriousness right now. I think in 2025, you will probably see high-profile bishops' papabile rating ascend and descend. Nobody expected 2 years ago that Cardinal Tagle's chances were going to go up, but they did, despite him having problems in the past. People now openly talk about a character that nobody would have thought because he's just a black hole of charisma, and that's Cardinal Pietro Parolin. Yeah. You just look at them and you can tell he's not a charismatic figure, but somehow his profile is going up. And 2 years ago, nobody had heard of Cardinal Pizzaballa. So again, you're probably going to see these things wane and wax. But if on the off chance that there is a conclave this year to give us a new pope, just remember the old adage: someone goes into the conclave, a pope, and walks out a cardinal. This is why I actually don't think Pizzaballa is going to become pope. Besides the fact you really believe, geopolitically speaking, that the cardinals are going to allow a man to become pope who has said the things he has said about Israel. In this environment, I doubt it. I very seriously doubt it. Just like I don't expect, as much as I would find it a tragically, horrifically funny thing, is if Cardinal Supich walked out as pope.
Yeah.
Won't happen. It won't happen because he's an American. Not because he's Cardinal Supich, because he's an American. An American's not going to be pope anytime soon. Again, I could be wrong. Could very much be wrong. You're more likely to get probably a Roman as pope, just statistically how these things go. We've had a long run now of non-Italian popes. And even then, Pope Francis isn't Italian, strictly speaking. He is Italian. We had a long run of non-Italian popes, and it might be somebody from the Italian peninsula who is pope. So go take a look there. I think Pizzaballa is actually Italian, so he will be, but you're probably going to get somebody well known to the Roman Curia. I don't tend to think it'll be a moderate.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up because Pope Francis himself has received tremendous criticism for what people perceive as his anti-Israeli sentiments. More specifically, lately with the infant Jesus being wrapped in the colors of Gaza or the Palestinians. Very very interesting imagery and symbology that he obviously allowed to be put out publicly. So I feel like we're entering into a very ultra Zionist phase of human history, and I think that might become a bigger issue. So a Pizzaballa could be very interesting under those circumstances. Would you agree?
He could be if he can get in. I wonder, because everything I've read about him says that he's conservative by post-conciliar standards. Can somebody like that get in right now with the makeup of the College of Cardinals? I don't know, especially since virtually every expert on conclaves and the relationships of the Roman Curia and everything else, they all say that the people who typically win these things have the best connections in the Roman Curia. That what unites everybody together, especially with now how all these cardinals are now coming from the peripheries, as Francis calls them. These are men who rarely come to Rome. So the only people they really know in the College of Cardinals are either their geographic confreres or their contact in Rome. That is, by the way, by design. That is absolutely by design. It helps to ensure that the next conclave fits with whatever the plan is. Mm. So I don't know if you get a conservative in that scenario. You might get Pietro Parolin, which is mildly horrifying because Francis
Yes.
apparently doesn't care one way or the other about the traditional mass and traditional teachings of the church and all this other stuff. Parolin apparently does, and not in a good way.
Not in the way we want, that's for sure. Hey, we are out of time on the radio side of our conversation. Thank you for hanging out with us today, Dr. Anthony Stine. Return to Tradition, returntotradition.org is his website. Check out his YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. I check it out every single day. The kind of conversations and stories he covers just aren't being covered elsewhere, so I really appreciate that resource. But we're going to go into the after show and continue the conversation with what your opinions are. And I just was having a thought about Operation Gladio and how the CIA meddled in the conclave that elected Paul VI. We could see that happening, but it might not just be the CIA. Mossad? Anyone? I don't know. Maybe that'll come up in the after show. Who knows? Tomorrow on the team, we have Jason Jones here. Praise be to God. We're going to be talking to him and Mike Kay, hopefully, and more coming up then. We'll see you there. God love you.
Catholic radio has just been a lifesaver for me. I still listen to it every day. I start my day with it. I listen to it all day long as much as I can. I am very grateful for it.
It's just an amazing thing to have, as I am new to Catholicism. Obviously, it's not only helping me, but it's helping so many other people on their walk.
Thank you. God bless you for iCatholic Radio. It has changed my life.
Donate today at thestationofthecross.com.
And we're back. Welcome to the Aftershow, everyone. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year. Praise be to God. It's crazy this new year already. It's not a good sign for the rest of the year, I'm going to argue. Am I the only one? I feel like I'm being conspiratorial when I say it, but I feel like there's going to be a big shoe that's going to drop in 2025. I don't know what it is, but I just feel like something big is going to happen. Dr. Stine, do you feel that?
Yes, and I don't know. I was listening to a very interesting interview. It was Charlie Kirk, an evangelical Protestant who's very friendly to Catholics, which is always nice, interviewing Stephen Greer, who claims to have all this insider information about UFOs, right? And he claims that's the shoe that's going to... Right. He claims that shoe's going to drop this year, and I fully would not be surprised, except for the whole fact that all it would confirm is that our government works with preternatural forces.
Right.
Wouldn't surprise me. At this point, would not surprise me.
I know. It's like, think how crazy the times we live in. Like, I was talking to the Unscripted crew about their 2024, memories and recap and all of that. And I had already forgotten about the drones. And they brought up the drones. I'm like, oh, yeah, the drones. I mean, like, good grief. That's the times we're living in when things are happening so crazy and so fast that it's hard to kind of keep track of everything. And we live in drone mania time. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. Ultimately, what I said to them was, your favorite conspiracy theory in regards to those drones or whatever, like, I don't think that matters. Like, I think the point to the exercise is simply to manipulate your mind and your emotions and the way you look at the world. It's just to move, it's to nudge you a little bit. You can think UFOs, you can think deep state, you can think foreign adversaries. They don't care as long as you are manipulated in how you perceive the world around you. And ultimately, if its operation was at Blue Torch, Blue Light, I forget.
Project Bluebeam.
Project Bluebeam. Yeah, ultimately, if it's that, well, then it sort of furthers their interest to a one world order anyway. But it wouldn't surprise me, too, to see that rolled out before us in 2025. Who knows? I mean, who knows? I don't know. It's crazy. We live in crazy times. James, good morning to you. Damon, Jerome, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Eileen, Yvonne, Paul, our friend from Buffalo. Karen Collins, good morning. Mike K, hopefully you're feeling better, Mike. Hopefully we can get you on the team. Jane and Jen, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Sci-Fi is here. Good morning to you. Praise be to Jesus. Thanks for hanging out with us today. KSW Benedictine Oblate, good morning. Evelyn, Flying Tigers, good morning, Rob. Praise be to God. Glad you're on the team. Happy New Year's to you. Simon, good morning to you. The third secret will be revealed this year, he says. Okay, well, I hope that's true, but at the same time, I don't want to like a front row seat to it. Sounds kind of crazy. Kilroy Jones, good morning to you. Lights 10, Damon Keller, good morning. L77, ho, good morning to you. Craig, Richard, good morning to you. Scrolling backwards, Frank Rangel, good morning. Jimmy Z, good morning. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Lynn Pine, Nick the Mike, good morning to everybody. Thanks for being on the team. Who's on Facebook? That's not an Abbott and Costello joke. Who's on Facebook? TikTok's on second. I don't know.
What's on Facebook?
Yeah. Mimi, good morning to you. Patty, Jane. Jane said, well, I suggested security at church. It was rejected. Typically have a few men near the door, but I suggested a sweep of the parking lot with the possibility of someone in the vehicle just sitting there. This was one suggestion that the team studying school shootings suggested. It's a common trait in mass shootings. That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, my parish used to have a guy who was a actual licensed professional security guard who was a parishioner there, and he volunteered to just stay there all day on Sunday. And he would wear literally a bandolier of shotgun ammo and clearly carrying a firearm. And that's what he would do afterwards.
That's so Oklahoma right there.
Right. It was not subtle. He started doing it when 4 or 5 years ago. Oh no, right after Roe was overturned and Catholic churches started getting targeted. It was not sending a terribly subtle message.
Oh, man.
And I'm in a castle doctrine state. I don't know how that works if you're defending a church, but I can't imagine Oklahoma juries coming down on the side of Antifa in that kind of a scenario. So, yeah.
The problem we have is, will your diocese support that is the next question. I mean, it's probably a tricky piece of business. When we had the Antifa riots, what year was that? 2020? We had the Antifa riots. I've told this story before. I volunteered to protect Annunciation Catholic Church downtown Houston because the Antifa had threatened the pastor there directly. They were going to a protest, and as they were walking by, they stopped to say, "Oh, look at this church right here." And then Father was out walking the grounds, and they basically threatened him, said they were going to come back. So he put out the call, and men responded, and I took a turn and did a night shift and stood up all night and walked the grounds, that kind of thing. And I remember, thinking, should I bring a sidearm? Should I bring a gun? And I had two thoughts. Number one is if I did get into an altercation, I mean, I wouldn't want my kids seeing my face on the news having shot somebody. That would suck.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, it would probably cause so much turmoil because the diocese would probably sue me. I would be charged criminally. So
yeah, it's like those convenience store clerks. They're the ones who get in trouble.
Right.
They're told.
Right.
They're told if there's a robber, if someone comes in, just hide under the counter and give him everything and let him go. The companies don't want to deal with that stuff. Right. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So I opted not to bring my gun. Go ahead.
Do your parishes or do your dioceses put up those unfortunate signs that advertise that the parish and cathedrals are a juicy target for this kind of stuff by saying that this is a gun-free zone, yada yada yada? Because in Archdiocese of Oklahoma City and in Tulsa, the Eastern Oklahoma Archdiocese, you find those signs on parish doors. Now, I will tell you, the traditional parishes just for some reason don't have those, and it could be. No, they don't, and it could be because I've heard through the grapevine that you can't throw a rock without accidentally hitting someone's concealed piece that they're carrying. That's right.
I went to one traditional parish. I won't say where, but I was at one traditional parish a couple years ago, and it wasn't a concealed carry. The dude was open carry at church, and everybody was cool with it. I'm like, that's so good. It wasn't at a parish in the South. which was even more amazing.
Did he at least have the good taste to open carry something obvious and eyebrow raising and not just like a little side piece, but he was carrying for some reason like an elephant gun on his back? Because that's the way to do it, right?
Yeah.
It got you to the kind of piece
it
that
was
says,
just like
I don't know if I want to roll up in an armored car because I might die.
Right, yeah. It is. We do live in interesting times, and I got to say, I think there will be a major difference here with traditional parishes and your regular Nova Scotia suburban parish, because those parishes are the ones most likely to put up the signs and not want guns around, whereas tried communities are going to be like, no, we're not going to stand around and just be shot and killed. You're out of your mind. We're gonna defend ourselves.
Right.
And
we have a duty to protect our parishes and our families and our priests. So, yeah.
Right. So you probably will see some more open carry if the days get more interesting, to say the least. It ought to be.
Yeah, Oklahoma is a constitutional carry state, and I don't see that many people open carrying. But I know that in a constitutional carry state, they also have concealed carry, and I would bet that if I were to go to Walmart an hour from now, I would see people who, probably half the men and 40% of the women probably have something on them. Just because it's the nature of the state.
Yeah. You got to know how to use it. I saw video footage this morning on X. Somebody had posted New Year's celebration here in Houston, Texas, my backyard, of these yahoos shooting off their automatic rifles, in the air, in their neighborhoods. And they're not even like pointing them straight up. They're like pointing them like this way. I'm like, those bullets are going to come down on some poor kid. They're going to come down in someone's house. They're going to come down in someone's car. It's insane.
Did you see Archbishop Gustavo? How he responded to the attacks in New Orleans and Manhattan and Las Vegas?
I saw his gobbledygook that you responded to, and it's mind blowing. Like just how
out of touch,
out of tone deaf. But is he really, or is he just being intentional?
He's blaming Trump for this. He's saying the killing today is a result of words and actions that leaders have demonstrated in our recent history. We should not blame others. We need to take responsibility. We need civil discourse and lots of humility and charity. That's him blaming Trump. That is without question what he's doing there.
That's insane.
It's insane. It is. And of course, also because he's operating, I believe, out of Europe, right? That he's also blaming the AfD. The German bishops have come out against essentially the German equivalent of like mainline Republicans, and they call them far right. They call them basically like the second coming of Hitler. Like funny. You go look at their policy positions. They're like, close the borders, cut taxes. They're like, oh, okay. Did you borrow your platform from Mitt Romney? Because it's pretty generic stuff. But that has got them terrified to the point where the bishops of Germany have made it their official position to get Catholics to not vote for them.
Did you hear there was an explosion in Germany, a fireworks-related explosion similar to the one in Hawaii? They had one in, I think it was Berlin, if I'm not mistaken. They had one there as well. Yeah.
It's almost as if there's a coordinated thing going on with ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, well, makes you wonder. It just makes you wonder. Things that make you go,
Is this a fight they want to pick? Because if you have been paying attention to this issue, especially in Europe, for the last 10, 15 years, you're going to notice the European response to this is getting less and less peaceful, to the point now where the Europeans are on the verge of snapping. And, there's an old adage that, Europeans are peaceful until they're not. And I don't know if I want to see the Germans pushed into the not stage again, because the last time they felt obligated, thank you, Treaty of Versailles, to doing that, it didn't go well for anybody. Mm-hmm, so let's hope that the locals, the local new arrivals, figure that out and control their communities. Because, I've read a lot of Catholic prophecy. And one of the prophecies about what looks like World War III is that you're going to get this whole great Catholic monarch thing. It sounds like it's a military dictator in France who pushes all the Muslims out of Europe. That's what it sounds like. Do you want to be around when that happens? Because a modern military dictator would look like a monarch to somebody in the Middle Ages, right?
The good news is it'll be the first time in the past few hundred years when someone in France has actually done something positively militarily. I mean, that's
right, because
a new trend for France.
Yeah, I think that they've been kind of
it'd be a return to form. Technically, the French, if you count up all the battles in European history or whatever like that, the French actually have won the most.
But it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. No, I'm saying it'd be a return to form compared to their recent history.
It's because
exactly. That's the point.
The French are like that iconic sports franchise that had a long run of championships, and then all of a sudden just went for like a decade of crap.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where we're at.
The French are the recent French military history is like the current New England Patriots. they're following. They're following up.
I'm historically a basketball guy, even though I haven't been in like a long time. But it's like the Chicago Bulls or
exactly.
the Lakers and the Celtics, right? Like in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were Celtics and Lakers.
Yeah.
And then for 25 years, the Boston Celtics were the laughingstock of the NBA, and then they started having champions.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the French.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the French.
Again, the French. I mean, it was Charlemagne and the Crusaders and all that sort of thing, and then even
the Holy Roman
Napoleon
Empire was
and everything.
French. The Holy Roman Empire French before it became Austrian.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So but it's just been the last 100 years they've been a little behind the times. So
a little behind.
It would be a return to form. Well, again, but that's kind of the point of France is it's the eldest out of the church that then like bloodily rejected the church and overthrew proper order, and then the prophecies are that it will return, which that's very poetic.
They're never going to step up to the plate until they put an end to the French Revolution. French Revolution has to die. And then, and only then, will we see something great come out of France. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, if the prophecies are true, the way the French Revolution dies is by nuclear holocaust. So there's that.
Basically, even if it's a limited nuclear holocaust, it's still a bad thing. It doesn't take many nukes fired off to have millions of people die hour by hour, as some of those prophecies say.
Yeah. Shannon says Cloward Piven is being implemented globally and is effective in destabilizing societies to soften them for acceptance to solutions, digital ID, UBI, CBDC, and global governance. And I think to your point, that is exactly at the heart of why I said with like the UFO, UAP drone story. It doesn't matter whether you think it's aliens, foreign people, or just our deep state. That part is neither here nor there. It's just moving you and nudging you to putting you off balance and seeing the world from a disjointed perspective and messing with your mind. That's part of it, because how do you get to the point where you will accept the solutions that they offer you? You know what I mean? Like, how do you get the whole world to the point where it accepts the solutions of the Antichrist? It doesn't happen all at once. You nudge people slowly along that line. And so they're going to continue to present unanswerable problem after unanswerable problem. And you're going to be so messed up by it that when they do offer a solution, whether it's good or bad, you're going to accept it, which is why I brought up the point with Brent Haynes earlier in the program. Is the terrorist attacks that we're seeing now, and we'll see probably in greater frequency moving forward, just going to be an excuse for them to continue to erode civil liberties? Patriot Act 2.0, which Biden was so proud of saying that he basically paved the way for the Patriot Act, back in the day with him and Bill Clinton. I mean, it seems like a false flag in some ways, or at least the consequences, the fallout is similar to false flags. It's just an excuse. It's a leveraging of an opportunity. We don't let any good chaotic moment go to waste, as Hillary Clinton, was famous for saying. It's like they're going to use that to their advantage.
That's an accusation that's been going around. It goes back to something Stephen Greer said. The one thing he was unequivocally right about, which is if they use the aliens thing, it's so they can put in totalitarianism.
Right.
That's why.
It's exactly, yeah.
And think about it this way. If they do go Project Bluebeam on everybody, there's enough Americans who grew up in watching Star Trek who think that what they're offering them is the Star Trek universe in real life, that they'd go along with it, forgetting the lesson of Star Trek. If you know anything about the Star Trek's fictional history, they got to the Star Trek universe by global thermonuclear warfare. And, World War III and science experiments gone awry and all sorts of, they nearly destroyed civilization. And the Star Trek universe is a silk gloved totalitarian state. It is. That's what people think they're going to get. And unfortunately, that's not what they're going to get. They're going to get a boot stamping on a human face forever, to borrow George Orwell's line.
It's a godless dystopian future. Hey, Richard speaks truth right now. Richard says Larry Bird is the GOAT. I would agree. Larry Bird is the GOAT. Greatest ever, in my opinion. I mean that even over Michael Jordan. What do you say, Dr. Stine?
I never had a strong opinion on who was the greatest ever, because I found it funny when I think somebody asked Michael Jordan recently how his Chicago Bulls team would do against like the modern Lakers, whoever the big team is now. Because I haven't paid attention in 10 years or something. But he said, we'd lose, but that's because we're in our 60s. When asked in his prime, he didn't think it'd be a contest. What would happen? Because these days, the athletes now, all they care about is like the contracts and the superstardom. Where at least those previous eras of ball, they actually cared about the team dynamic. And Bird and Jordan and all those guys were much more. They wanted to win. There were games where Michael Jordan didn't score much of anything because it worked better for their team for him to get 15 assists and help other people score. I don't know if you see that now. And the funniest thing is the NBA's ratings are the worst they've been in like 30 years because of politics and because it's gotten boring. The NBA goes through this every few years, right? Where all of a sudden, they change the rules. But, when I was a kid, I grew up as a Portland Trail Blazers fan. Clyde Drexler, Terry Porter, all those guys. A team that probably would have won 3 or 4 championships if the Chicago Bulls didn't exist at the time. And the game is entirely different now than it was then. That's why I have a hard time, like, who's the greatest of all time? I don't know if Wilt Chamberlain in his prime would do well in the NBA today.
Interesting.
Because the game is so different.
It is.
It's just it's a fundamentally different game. And I'm sure you could say the same thing about the NFL. You take your, iconic players from the 70s and then put them in today. It's a completely different game with a completely different culture, by the way. Have you ever noticed how toxic the NFL culture is? How it's essentially it's the borrow a line that people are trying to make popular and hope they're successful, the hick lib thing. The NFL is a leftist organization. It is. It has become captured by the left.
Well, I feel the same way about all these sports agencies. Oh, yeah. All of these sports, they're all the same.
Except maybe the NHL, maybe not the NHL. Mostly because Americans don't care about hockey. It's like the number 4 or 5 sport in the country. But it's a vehicle for promoting revolution. Yet, how do they do it? They present to you something that Heartland of America likes: football and football heroes. I would bet you whoever the Kelsey guy is who's involved with Taylor Swift, that he was probably more popular before he opened his mouth than he is now, because he opened his mouth. Right? The illusion is they can promote these values to you subtly, but unfortunately, these guys don't know how to be subtle. There's nothing less subtle on this earth than a football player. Okay, these guys are blunt force instruments.
It's so funny when you see, if you ever run into a football player in real life, and you'll realize, wait, this is that running back who out on the field looks tiny compared to the guys around him. It's like, oh man, that guy's out. That running back is so small and short. Like it's amazing he's even out there on the field.
Oh, I actually had this happen.
When you meet them in real life, and they are like twice the size of you. It's like what? This is insane.
They also have a look to their face, that old physiognomy thing you see people talk about online, and the way they carry themselves. Yeah. I was picking up my wife a sandwich at a fast food drive-thru the other day, and a guy leaned out college age. I knew he was a football player within half a second of interacting with him. Yep. And I asked him, "Are you a football player?" He said, "Yep, yes, sir, I am." I'm like, where you go? And he told me what college he's going to go to, and I just told him, "Protect your head." Immediately,
exactly. Protect your head. Oh my heavens!
They have a look.
Hey, Sci-Fi Mike says, haven't we been nudged for thousands of years? I would agree. I totally believe that's the plan of the devil. And it's happened since the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. And it will be the order of the day until the second coming. However, I'm going to argue that in the final time, in the final confrontation, as we near the end, it's just going to get more intense, right? I think, how do you get to a day, as St. Paul describes it, when your friends, your family are all going to accept, or the majority of them are going to accept the Antichrist and his solution, they're going to worship him as a god. That's what they're going to do. That's what St. Irenaeus says is the great apostasy, is worshiping the Antichrist as a god from the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, which is the third temple. How are we going to get to that day unless they nudge you first so that you are prepared to accept whatever solutions they offer you?
This is why I actually don't think that the Fatima message is going to be fulfilled at the end of the decade, because that suggests a general increase in generic spirituality. People being open to what they call the supernatural, which is really the preternatural, right? A general increase in religiosity. After all, he's going to be worshipped as a god. And right now we're at the lowest ebb in belief probably in human history. So something's going to have to change that. In fact, you would actually have, I believe one of the signs of his imminent arrival is a general rise in religiosity again, including the conversion of Jews to the faith, because universal assent to the fathers is that the Jews will convert to Catholicism in the final days. It'll run up to the final days.
Yeah.
So watch for that to happen before you have the rebuilding of the third temple and all the signs of the skies and all the rest of it is going to be our elder brothers in the faith converting en masse. If they're not, that doesn't mean horrible things aren't going to happen that are a step in the direction of that. In fact, maybe the things going on in Israel right now are laying the groundwork for their conversion. Maybe they're going to watch their third temple get rebuilt or something and sacrifices offered and just bad things start happening and make them realize, maybe that Jesus guy, maybe he was onto something. Right? That might be might be how it plays out.
I think it was Damon. Damon triggered me a little bit. I think he said this yesterday in our Telegram group. We are as close to 2050 as we are to the year 2000. That blows my mind.
Oh, no, this occurred to me yesterday. Insane. I nearly took to social media and said, congratulations, we are now 25% of the way through the 21st century. Almost
crazy. Man, I remember New Year's night, 1999 going into 2000. I remember that night very clearly. We were at a friend's house. Yeah, my wife and I were at a friend's house. We had no children yet. We weren't even married yet. We wouldn't get married till September of 2020 or 2000. And we were celebrating that night thinking Y2K was about to happen. We were thinking that the world was going to shut down and we were going to go into survival mode, but we were still having a great time that night. I can remember very clearly. It just blows my mind that we're halfway to 2050.
Well, I remember that night because I had some friends over at my apartment at the time. And that morning, the friend of mine who'd been over and he'd had a few too many drinks, really weird guy. Like, you would not expect this guy to be a super Star Trek nerd because in every other way imaginable, he was not that stereotype. But he walked outside, he opened the door, walked outside. He's like, where's the Enterprise? We're in the future now, right? Because it's the year 2000. Very distinctly disappointed.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, you never know.
This is why I try not personally to make, year and date predictions about things, just because church kind of warns us not to do that. Yeah. Be aware of the signs. But of course, ultimately, the ultimate sign of your own times is your own pulse, your own physical health, because you never know when you're going to drop dead. The world is coming soon for everybody.
How do you feel about New Year's goals, or how people make this year I'm gonna lose 82 pounds or whatever. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I generally think they're stupid. Like I always start my diet regimes the day after Christmas, 2 days after Christmas, right? Somewhere around there. I never wait for the first. Now, if you want to make a good New Year's resolution, make a resolution to go to confession more often, to pray something, but don't wait till the new year to go on a diet. Look on your calendar, look at your refrigerator. If you're not willing to throw the stuff away, figure out how long it's going to take you to eat all that stuff and then start as soon as you're done with that. But don't wait for the new year to do that.
Yeah.
Just like don't wait for the new year to go to the gym. I have been out of the gym because I have a sinus infection, but it's mostly gone now, and I'm going to have to probably go get on some antibiotics to get rid of the rest of it. But I'm looking to get back in the gym, but I'm not wanting to go today because I know what's going to happen. And also, I don't like going to the gym during the day. My gym's 24 hours. I love 1 o'clock in the morning because there's only serious people there. If I go right now, there's going to be women wearing very little clothing with cameras on them.
That's the worst.
It's the worst. Like that's one of the reasons I spend almost zero time on Instagram, because Instagram goes, "Oh, well, you're a male in this age group. You want to see this," and then recommends just horrible stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Instagram. You're as bad as Reddit now. Thanks.
Right. Yeah. X is that way too. Their curated feed for you is horrible. I actually turn it off just so I don't have it.
Mine doesn't have that stuff in it so much, but it's got a lot of secular politics in it. And I try to go back and forth to following sometimes, but that's almost as disturbing. You'll see like people with really bad takes about things going on in the church.
Yeah.
Like I saw somebody tweeting about how like it's un-Catholic for you to call Mary co-redemptrix because Pope Francis was against that title, as were his predecessors. I'm like, well, yeah, but like 9 predecessors to them called her the mediatrix of all graces and co-redemptrix. You just make it a case for sedevacantism at this point when you say that.
Yeah, the ultramontanist plague on the church has really been a problem, and I think I see that getting worse. I don't see that getting any better. We're at the point now that whatever the Pope says has to be true no matter what, or must be followed, hook, line, and sinker no matter what, even if it's his private opinion. Like Catholics no longer distinguish or care anymore. We're so poorly catechized, we can't tell the difference. And so it's just all on the team or all off the team. There's no middle ground.
I should do a video sometime about a teaching of the church, whatever it is, some social teaching from before the council and then after the council. Say before the council, the church taught, the popes taught this. Say never mention one time who popes were. Have footnotes to say where they came from, so people can go check it later. But never say this was Leo the 13th, this was Gregory the 16th. No. And then afterwards, do the post-conciliar one. Because as I've told people before, what radicalized me was writing my doctoral dissertation on Catholic social teaching, and couldn't help but notice that the church preached essentially decentralization, local autonomy for economics and politics and things, built around the most local common unit possible, which is the family, and then to your like neighborhood and town and all the way up through your federal system, if you had one. And then that got inverted after Vatican II to proto-globalism.
Wow.
I put that in my first draft of my doctoral dissertation, and along with stuff about how this is a hallmark, may possibly, of modernism. And my chair of my committee said the Catholic Church no longer condemns modernism, never longer calls it a heresy. And I was like, okay, thank you for confirming everything I have come to fear. And just had to edit that out of my dissertation because I didn't want to argue the point with him.
A Ruby's 200, I think it's 200, not 2000. I'm blind and it's very far away. So anyway, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out. Says, how do we know we're not in apostasy right now? I'm a Protestant and my church shut down. And when it reopened, they still required masks. That's one reason why I finally sought out Catholics. Well, I'm glad you're here. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be praying for your journey, obviously. What I would say is read St. Irenaeus and his book Against Heresies. We're talking very early church father, 2nd century, early 2nd century, mid 2nd century. I have it over here. That's why I keep looking on this way. And in there, he talks about the Antichrist quite a bit, actually. You can actually Google it. Go to newadvent.org. You can read his entire Against Heresies right there on the website. You can actually do a search for Antichrist term, and you can get all the references as well. Great way to skip through it because it's a big work. But when you look at, I have St. Irenaeus from that work on the Antichrist recently in the last couple of months on my channel. On a uploaded video or live video?
An uploaded video. You can go a search for.
Yeah,
you can go to the channel, just search Antichrist and find the one on St. Irenaeus.
Yeah, but I would say when you read St. Irenaeus, he makes it clear that the Antichrist will be Jewish, come from Jewish background, which is why he will rebuild. When he rebuilds the temple in Jerusalem, he wins the favor of the Zionists there. But at some point, it's not just the offering of animal sacrifices according to the Old Testament law, but he will be worshipped as a god himself in that temple. And he somehow wins the Muslims over to participate in that as well. Because, by the way, the Muslims are also looking for a Messiah. Most people don't know that, but it's true. The Muslims are looking for a Messiah. The Jews that have not converted still look for a Messiah. And they will be misled by the Antichrist, according to St. Irenaeus and St. Jerome, by the way. St. Jerome's commentary is on the Daniel, which I have over here as well, also excellent. So St. Irenaeus, 2nd century, St. Jerome, 4th century, and very strong, very great early church resources. I would encourage you to read both because you'll get a better sense of it. So how do you get the world to accept the lie when it happens? Well, you do things like make them mask up when they don't need to. You close worship down. You manipulate and you nudge them, and you compound that with global catastrophe, terror, and then, by the way, here's the solution to your problem. And we're so desperate by that point that we will accept whatever solutions they offer us, and we go hook, line, and sinker. And then all of a sudden, the world is primed and ready for the Antichrist to come on and be revealed on the world stage, which, according to St. Irenaeus, is in the actual act of worshiping him as a god. The example he gives us in his work against heresies is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they were asked to worship, to bow down to a 66 cubit tall statue of a pagan god of wasn't it Nebuchadnezzar, and they refused to do so, and they were thrown into the fire. That's the same scenario Irenaeus gives us for the end times and the Antichrist. That was a warm-up act, according to St. Irenaeus. So that's what I would recommend that you check out. So we'll see. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
Oh, it just came out that the guy in Las Vegas, the remains they found, was a guy directly tied to the guy in New Orleans.
I talked about
same
that.
Military experience. Yeah. I mean, it's being confirmed now. They're finding out like his specific backgrounds and things. It wouldn't shock me if he had said the Muslim equivalent of the sinner's prayer, or whatever it is. That thing you say that makes you a Muslim instantly, as long as there's a witness, whatever that is. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
Yeah.
It's weird how Protestant they are so similar in that way.
Yeah. Matt Livelsberger is the guy's name. Not necessarily the greatest, the most ISIS of names you've ever heard. Matt Livelsberger. But I said this during the radio side. What are the chances? What are the chances that you get two guys who are in the Army at the same base at the same time? We don't know if, whether or not they ever talked to each other, knew each other, or whatever. There's a lot of people on these military bases. I've served in the military. I didn't know most of the people on those bases.
You stretch the possibility of a coincidence, though, when it's two things at the same day by people from the same military base with similar backgrounds.
Yeah, you might as well play the lottery at this point, because your chances are probably better to win the lottery than to have the pure coincidence of these two guys who might have crossed paths on the same military base at the same time, and also be involved in incidents on the very same day that both have chaotic outcomes to them. I mean, it's just, the chances are, it's not a coincidence. It's just not a coincidence. So
it'll be good to know what the person in Manhattan was. If you have another former special forces military intelligence guy behind that, at this point, there's something wrong, something very seriously wrong going on. Because what does it take for, especially since the guy in New Orleans came from a family who had been Muslim, and then he did what seemingly happens in most of these cases. His parents came in, were moderate types, and then their kid had a religious conversion and became radicalized. But what about those other guys? Right? So,
by the way, the mosque that the New Orleans driver belonged to in Houston, Texas, put out a statement on their Facebook page saying, hey, if a journalist or if the FBI approach you, don't say anything to them, report to CARE, and then let them handle it from there.
I guess that's a better response than what happened yesterday. You see about that march, I think it was in New York.
Yeah, I reported on that too.
To go worldwide.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm almost wondering, are you asking to be deported? Like, if you're not here legally and you're marching like that for that, you are literally putting yourself near the top of the list to be given the boot out of here in 3 weeks. I know that's harsh sounding. We're supposed to, as Catholics, apparently open our borders and let anybody in who wants, according to Francis. But telling you, Americans are not going to be putting
I mean, as much as I would love to say that the next 4 years are going to be super better than the last 4 years when it comes to security and immigration, I'm not convinced it's true. Not because that Donald Trump doesn't want it to be better. He might have the best intentions. But I'm not convinced that no matter what he does will have the kind of impact that we're going to want to see. In fact, I would argue that there might even be an overreaction to some things that have even greater problems that are presented down the road. Who knows? We'll see, I guess. Lost Creole says, what can one take away from yesterday? As my grandpa used to say, nothing good ever happens after midnight. Go home at midnight. That's so true. And I would even say, as I used to have a spiritual director that used to talk about this, men should not be up that late. Go to bed.
Yeah.
Go to bed, because bad things happen in the middle of the night. Sins and temptations happen. And that's why I brought up my own experience in New Orleans back when I was in the Marine Corps. In fact, I wasn't even allowed to be in New Orleans. Me and a Navy buddy, we were at Millington, Tennessee. We were going through school in Millington, Tennessee. And me, my Marine buddy, and this Navy guy, the Navy guy had the car. So me and my other buddy, we were just tagging along. He goes, he wanted to go to New Orleans for Mardi Gras, and we're like, let's do it. So we snuck out, and we snuck down there, drove all the way down to New Orleans. And of course, being knuckleheads, we got totally intoxicated, and bad things, mortal sins happened. Imagine getting run over by a truck. You have no chance to beg God for mercy. You just die in a state of mortal sin. You go straight to hell. You don't pass, go. You don't collect $200. You just go straight to hell forever. I mean, that's what we're talking. Like, that's compounding this situation even worse, in my opinion, because that's what people do on Bourbon Street in New Orleans.
But according to Archbishop or Cardinal Gustavo, we're supposed to just blame the politicians for saying mean things.
Mean things, yeah.
Yeah. This is why I reported this morning on how much I actually like Trump's pick to be the Vatican ambassador.
I saw that. You're
all
a big
the right
Brian
people
Birch
were
guy.
like against it. I'm like, yeah, all the right people hated him. I'm like, oh, that's all the endorsement I need. If Massimo Fagioli is against you, who could be, if Austin Everett doesn't like you, then you.
Whoa! You suddenly made my top 10 list. That's great, Brian. Here's my thing about that. Yes, Brian Birch is critical of Francis. There's no doubt about that. But my worry is he's also one of these kind of Catholics. I'm not downing him in any way. I'm just, it's kind of like when you get conservative Catholics who are just more Republican than anything. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like he falls into that camp. Whereas I'm like, listen, we're Catholic, let the chips fall where they may. And when you got Republicans supporting in vitro fertilization, gay marriage, and access to abortifacient drugs by mail, this is an issue that can't be tolerated. And a lot of Catholics that are Republican and conservative fall into that camp. They give a pass to all that stuff, and they're not holding any of these people accountable. I feel like he might fall into that camp, and I'm concerned about that.
That's why I keep telling people I'll believe that, the woke is retreating. We're fighting back against the woke. I'll believe that when Obergefell gets overturned, and not before.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, and not only if it goes overturned, but the public's reaction to it getting overturned.
That too.
Because I will tell you, this isn't a stretch to say, there is a lot of buyer's remorse among people who are now middle-aged or approaching middle age, who 20 years ago were supportive of some version of gay marriage.
Sure.
There's a lot of buyer's remorse because it turned out all those pesky evangelicals and trad Catholics who warned about the slippery slope not being a fallacy but being very real were right. And so we'll see. We shall see, because I don't think it's that much of a stretch to think that one could get overturned. I don't think it's that much of a stretch. It would be interesting to see the consequences of that.
Yes.
Because, like I keep telling people, you let the Democrats back into the White House in the next 10 years, they're going to put Roe back in if they can. And except by putting Roe back in, they're going to put Roe back in on steroids. It's going to be like Minnesota Roe, basically. No restriction. So that's what they say Roe did. That's what they claim. Even if you've read the decision and you read the jurisprudence that came after it, you realize that's not what Roe did. I'm not saying Roe was a good decision by any stretch, but what they'll do will make it look like a prudent decision comparatively.
Yeah, we'll see.
But no,
let's find out.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see. I don't think that was on the docket, but there are some seriously interesting cases on the docket this year, including about gun control and I think voting and all sorts of other stuff. So it could be another consequential year for the,
what do you think?
court.
We've got what, 18 days left until the inauguration. We've already had drone UFO UAP invasion. We've already had 2 terrorist attacks. Might have been actually more if we can connect the further dots. I mean, what else do you think might happen in 18 days before the inauguration? It seems very interesting.
I suspect they're going to arrest somebody who's trying to get into Mar-a-Lago, or that someone's going to try to crash the gate or something. Someone's going to go not think that that there's very good security there. Is going to try. That's my suspicion. It's something they're going to try something that could result in the inauguration not happening outside, that it being happening in the White House, like in the olden days when these things were not these big coronation ceremonies like they are now. Don't be surprised if that happens. A lot of security experts are saying that the inauguration is an obvious target, not just because that's where your presidents are at, but because they are high-profile public gatherings. If you want to demoralize a country, that's what terrorism is about, is demoralizing a country, among other things, then that'd be a logical choice. So you might see them go after Mar-a-Lago or something like that in the run-up to that.
Do you think that Trump will be successful in the negotiations for Ukraine? I mean, I'm hearing reports that Russia is already sort of rejecting his ideas. You think he can pull that off?
That they were going to. I'm sure they knew that they were going to reject the idea of putting NATO on the border there, security forces. My suspicion is he does not care about Ukraine, is willing to just offer them up to Russia, if need be, to end that stupid war. That's my suspicion. For better or worse, he's willing to just offer them up. I will expect to see that war end in the next couple of months. Whether it's on terms that are even remotely decent for Ukraine, who knows? Because they are the victim here. Not so much of Russia. Russia did what you would expect after a decade of deep state manipulation there. If you go back to the coup that happened in Ukraine in 2014, that was the domino that kicked all this off. And that was done by the Obama administration in the intel agencies, with also a lot of help from the English and others. This was expected to happen. I don't think that war is going to end in a good way for the Ukrainians, but at this point, it's the most logical way you could tip the scale of civilization over at this stage. I do think it'll be resolved, and I think what will probably be what ushers in that prophetic period will probably be Russia involved in something else, probably NATO betraying this agreement in the next decade. Probably that's how it's going to happen.
You think Joe Biden will issue a pardon for himself as he leaves office to ensure that there can be they can't treat him like they treated Trump?
I hope so. I absolutely hope so. That way that they can take this to the Supreme Court and say, can a president preemptively pardon anybody, including himself, for crimes that haven't actually been declared? Because on its face, that's unconstitutional. So I really hope he does.
Yeah.
He clearly is an Operation Burn It All Down. He hates his own party, but doesn't like the guy. He marginally dislikes less the guy coming in than his own party at this point. So he's just burning the whole thing down.
Christine says, will Biden remember to give himself a pardon? Probably not. But his wife is going to remind him, trust me. And the hour before they leave, sign this paper. What is it? It doesn't matter. Just sign it.
She doesn't need to get him to sign it. You know why? They have an automatic signature machine that has the president's signature in it.
There you go.
There's some security thing to make sure that it doesn't just get used by anybody. But we're talking about the woman who literally sat at the head of the table in these official cabinet meetings. And we're talking about the woman who decided to break 200 plus years of precedent by having the Marine Corps write an anthem for the First Lady. That had never been done before. And she demanded an anthem, like Hail to the Chief, except for the First Lady.
Oh my.
And I hope that when Melania Trump is asked about this, she says, never ask me about this again. Burn the thing. Destroy all copies.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, you mentioned Russia. We were talking about Russia a second ago. This whole Sarah Adams interview on the Sean Ryan show, which was now months ago, actually. And this is none of what she said was new. She had been saying this now for a while. She was at Benghazi. If you don't know much about Sarah Adams, she was at Benghazi with the CIA. She underwent the whole crazy attack that they all survived. Praise be to God. Not all of them, most of them. And she helped to write a book about all of that and her experiences. She's still in the intelligence business. And she's been sounding the alarm about all this. But part of her story on the Sean Ryan show was Russia's involvement in all of this. Russia has been helping with material cooperation with these groups, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Taliban, to get into the United States as a retribution against the United States for helping Ukraine against them. Tit for tat. Tit for tat. So
that's, of course, that's if her story. That's if her story checks out. If she's still involved with the CIA, you should take anything she says with a gigantic grain of salt, because Operation Mockingbird was also very real. Okay,
that brings up another question: is will we trust anything about any of the reportage on these stories?
No, this is why I go to X for my news for most things, unless it's news about the church. Then I go to European outlets, because the church media reporting has not caught up with the secular reporting on using X as a place to get information out the quickest. Not yet, anyway.
All the time,
yeah. So, but I don't trust anybody connected to the intelligence agencies at this point. So we'll find out. It also could be a whole lot of nothing. It could be that 2025 is a dull year. I don't think it's going to be. I think there's going to be ups and downs like any year. But I remember in the beginning of 2024, people thought things were going to be apocalyptic, right? You remember the old meme that started out, where it would be like, it would show like New Year's, right? It'd be, 2020 was going out and it was a monster because it was 2020. And then it was 2021 coming in, it was worse, right? How it was just always worse and worse. 2024 was pretty tame compared to the, 2021, pandemic, kicking off of these wars and things. But there were some big things that happened, including Russia using a multi-warhead vehicle to supersonic or hypersonic vehicle to drop ordnance on Ukraine in a clear message to the West, right? That's a big enough story that I didn't see in anybody's year in review news stories for secular news outlets. Nobody talked about that. That is a gigantic signal. Mostly to the Europeans, because the vehicle they used for that could not hit the United States. It doesn't have the range unless launched from a ship. But you could hit Paris with that thing from Russia. So again.
By the way, our good friend Rob, Flying Tigers Rob, he says he's offended because we've criticized the intelligence community, which he used to belong to. He says Sarah was 100% right. I don't think she works for the CIA anymore. I think she's in the private sector, still doing intelligence analysis for on the private sector. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's the case.
Rob gets a pass, but he should also keep that affiliation close to the chest with the projects he's working on, because there are immediately people will be like, "Oh, you interned with the CIA 60 years ago, Fed." Doesn't matter that you've owned a Baskin Robbins ever since then, because we like it. You're obviously glowing. There are people like that out there who are just utterly irrational about things.
Yeah,
not everybody who works for the CIA is a bad guy.
That's true, right? Obviously. And, it's like I said this with my conversation with Brent Haynes. On one hand, we want to be protected from terrorist attacks. We want to be able to live the American dream and go about our lives and have peace and harmony and all the rest. And so we want, it's like from A Few Good Men, Colonel, what's his name? You want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. There's like that whole scene there. It's like, it's true. We do. We want men to do the dirty work and kill bad guys and defend us. But at the same time, we also don't trust the same people we task with that purpose. We don't trust them because they'll lie to us, because in one breath they'll tell us, oh, these drones, we don't know anything about them. They're totally harmless and they haven't broken the law. No, actually, it's demonstrable. They've broken the law. What are you talking about? Like, we're not dumb.
Do you remember this way. You remember General Mattis and how Trump supporters loved General Mattis until they learned the hard way that guy couldn't be trusted, that he was just another one of the establishment types. He had the persona that we all kind of think Patton had, and they kind of hoped that like Patton, he would, come back with some hard truth to tell people after everything was done. And instead, he was a team player all the way. And that's why you got to be careful.
But Obama did that to us. Obama reinvented the Pentagon during his 8 years in office and elevated these woke go-alongs to high-ranking positions, which is what I said, when we did election night coverage. If Donald Trump doesn't do that to the Pentagon, nothing will matter in his next 4 years. Like, if he really wants a lasting impact over the next decade or two, he needs to fire all of these people out of the Pentagon and then actually promote, military officers who aren't going to be ideologues, DEI ideologues, that they're going to, be patriots or whatever. And even those guys are going to not be perfect. Even them are going to have some flaws and imperfections that we're not going to love, but they're going to be better than what's there. Will he do it?
That's exactly right. He needs to do. He has to clean up the intelligence agencies and the Pentagon. Otherwise, this peace that he talks about, this, even if it's a very just old-fashioned liberal, little L liberal, or maybe philosophically liberal vision of trade and all this other stuff equals peace. If he wants that to have a chance, he has to clean out those apparatuses. He has to undo everything Obama did. And he's already done half of it. He annihilated Obama's political coalition. That thing is dead. You could see the way minority groups in this country react to Democrats pandering to them after the election, right? Like, you could see it. But he has to go through and break up the permanent infrastructure in the government. We'll see how well that goes. As much as I respect the enthusiasm of Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk in that, there's still something to be said about the fact that they named the agency to do that after a meme coin online. That's Doge.
It's so true.
I get having a sense of humor about things, but still,
it's the world we live in.
This is why I
now.
post memes on my Facebook page all day. Like, people, I think, are disappointed when they find me on Facebook and see that I'm not just spamming Catholic Church news all day on my Facebook. I'm like, Here, have a meme.
Here, have a meme. Flying Tiger says, quote, "People sleep peaceably in their beds at night because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf," close quote. George Orwell. Yep. Yeah. Well, I think it's true, but at the same time, I think we can't. I've tried to have this conversation with a historian before. I see parallels to the fall of the Western Roman Empire in our current times, and a big factor in the fall of the Western Roman Empire was just how corrupted the Praetorian Guard was. They were picking and choosing emperors, like it was going out of style. And what's interesting about that, in my opinion, was how we almost converted the empire itself, thanks in part to St. Paul, when he was under his 2 years of house arrest. When you read the letter of Acts, the book of Acts, he was under house arrest for 2 years. He did not die at the end of book of Acts. A lot of people don't know that. He was actually released, and he would go on and later be rearrested and later be executed. But when you read the book of Acts, he was under house arrest in Rome, and it was the Praetorian Guard who kept him. And he was allowed to have guests. He was allowed to go to, to the market. He was allowed to, walk and talk and hang out and have social parties. He was also allowed to evangelize the Praetorian Guard. And every few days, they'd have to give him a new guard. And so by the time his 2 years had come and gone, he'd practically gone through the entire Praetorian Guard. He knew all of them. He had written correspondence with the governor of Nero, his teacher. So he had very deep and intimate connections with the emperor's house and all of his guards. And he could have, if allowed to continue, convert all of them. But then you get further down, a couple more 100 years, the Praetorian Guard's so corrupt by then, they're picking and choosing emperors. Mm-hmm. Things are bad. The very people that you put onto that wall to protect you, to defend you, are the ones that are your enemies at that point. And I see us. We're kind of right there. I think a lot of people
isn't that what
happens
when this is the old adage of power corrupting, right? This is what happens when you give power to anyone. The what's the plural of Cincinnatus? The Cincinnatuses of the world are few and far between. The ones who are given power and then willingly give it up. The George Washingtons they're literally offered to be made king, and then they say, "No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to go retire to Mount Vernon." Those, that rarely happens.
Yeah, Lost Creole is right. Oh, wait, Rome has fallen, he says. I'm a member of the Roman Catholic Church. We are successors of Rome. You're right in that sense. That is a fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy, by the way. The prophet Daniel spoke about how the kingdom would be taken away from the Roman Empire and given to the saints of the church. But Daniel's prophecy is also that at the end times, it would be the corruption within the church that would lead to the final consummation, the final tribulation. So Daniel's prophecy plays a big role in that. And you're 100% right. It was the fall of Rome that the church stepped into that breach and took over. And that's why we have terms like the diocese today. That all comes from the fall of the Roman Empire.
Pontifex Maximus.
Yeah, exactly. We took on that role. But I'm referring more about the secular government of the Roman Empire than I am the church. Damon, good morning to you. Close all our foreign bases, bring our troops home to protect our borders. I kind of more, as the older I get, I'm more in the isolationist mode. I would say I would agree with that. Dr. Stine, what about you? Do you think we should be isolationists?
Yes. Not like totally isolationist. Obviously, you don't want to have a Hitler 2.0 show up, right? And just twiddle your thumbs. But I would prefer at this point that the U.S. take a long break from militarism. It would be better for the soul of the country. Americans are weary of war. We're tired of it. We're tired of being the world's police, and we're jaded about the whole thing. And it would be much more moral for us to step back and not be that anymore.
So could an argument be made? Let's just say there was a dirty bomb, nuclear war, whatever. We were attacked tomorrow, God forbid. And America was our power grid, everything collapses. Our society is in survival mode. We would essentially at that point be shrinking back hardcore, which would leave a void, right? I think this, if without a nuclear war, we just draw back, we leave a void. If there is like a major issue, like a nuclear war, and we have to draw back, we leave a void. I think in both circumstances, the result is the same, a void, and nature abhors a vacuum. It would fill that void with something bad, like Russia, like China, like ISIS or whatever, or just some evil dude. I mean, wouldn't that be the result of that? Can you make an argument to say we can't at this point, the ship has sailed, we must maintain our course just to maintain, the status quo? Because if we pull back, we will definitely see like a Hitler 2.0 or something along those lines.
The only reason that I would just accept morally America continuing to be the world's policeman is because the alternatives are all awful, absolutely awful. Russia and China being an alliance between them, which exists already, being the alternative. Because the European Union lacks what's called heavy lift capability. They have it in a very limited way, which means they can't exert military power to keep the peace. Which right now, it's more than likely you're going to see Trump in the next 2 months have the Navy go in and take care of those terrorists who are shooting up the trade lanes in the Mediterranean, whoever those guys are. Not Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf. He's likely to do that, and I don't think anybody's going to object other than the Iranians who are sponsoring them. But who would the alternatives to do that be? And do you like the options? Do you like the idea of the moral order China and Russia would impose? I don't like the moral order we've imposed, but it's sunshine and pancakes by comparison. It's a good time by comparison to what they would impose, because people believe that because you're allowed to be Orthodox Christian in Russia now, that they are somehow now returned to the faith according to prophecy. When no, they're in schism. And the Orthodox are heretics. I'm sorry to be the one to remind you of this. It's objectively better that you can be an Orthodox Christian than out in the open without negative consequences than it was 30 years ago in Russia. That's a step in the right direction. But don't mistake what they're doing there. It's not good.
Well, on that bright and sunny point, Dr. Anthony Stine, thanks for your time today. We got to wrap it up today. Tomorrow on the program, Jason Jones. But speaking of Russia, on Monday, I'm going to be interviewing a traditional Roman Catholic who lives in Russia, took his wife and kids and moved there on purpose, says it's a great place to live. We're going to get him on the team to really explore that with him on Monday. But tomorrow, Jason Jones is here. We're going to talk to him about the whole immigration HB1 thing. We'll see what he has to say about that. We'll see you there. Praise be to God. Appreciate everybody hanging out and all of your chats. It's really great. Share us with a friend. We'd be grateful to you. Dr. Stine, God bless you. God love you. We'll see you next time.
God bless.